Hey everyone, Ryan Young, KAATARO Jiu-jitsu. I hope you're doing well. So we're back in the studio, I'm back at the whiteboard, and we're gonna do a little school time lesson here. So how do we know, I did a video a while ago about need to know versus good to know techniques. So I get a lot of follow-up questions. What are the need to know techniques? What are the good to know techniques, right? Everybody wants the answers, right? So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a time period to think about it. But we'll give you some answers today. But I need to back up and I need to go over a principle. And the principle that I want to go over with you today is the Pareto principle. What's the Pareto principle? The Pareto principle says that the square root of your population of something is equal to 50% of your success, or your results, or your profits, or your go-to techniques in this case. So your X is equal to the number of techniques that you know, total, and your Y is equal to your useful techniques. So what is this saying? That out of all the techniques you know, really, only the square root of them, so in this case, let's say you know 100 techniques. The square root of 100 is equal to 10. So out of your 10 techniques that you know, or out of your 100 you know, only 10 account for 50% of your success. Think about that. When you really think about it, so what do I normally do when I'm training? Am I, not in what you're successful with, not what you necessarily use, because sometimes you may do one thing over and over and over and you suck at it. Think of what actually works for you, your go-to moves. It'll be a small minority of the total of what you know. So what does that mean? So I'll give you an idea. What do I do most of the time? I pass guard. I play guard. I escape mount. I play mount. I choke a lot. I armbar a lot, but not as much. I rarely do foot locks. I rarely do any kind of leg work, but that doesn't mean that I can't. I just don't do it as often. So that kind of gives you an idea as far as stuff that I do a lot of versus what I don't do. I don't do a lot of, say, De La Riva stuff and the berimbolo and all the stuff that comes from that, reverse De La Riva. I don't do a lot of different sweeps. I have go-to sweeps, for instance, the scissor sweeps and certain hook sweeps. That's pretty much it. So those are my useful ones, but all the others are part of what I know. So now let's kind of add to this now. You have the Pareto on the one end, and you also have the 80-20. The 80-20 expands on this 10. So if on this 50. So 50% of my useful techniques come from, in this case, the square root of 100 or 10% of my total techniques. Now if I expand that to 20% of techniques, then what that'll mean is this 50 now goes to 80. So 80% of my successful outcomes comes from 20% of what I know. So that being the case, this is a common thing that we use in business a lot, right? I was in sales for a number of years, and what I found is I would have a 20% client ratio that would actually account for 80% of the revenues I generated, right? So when I thought about what money I earned to put food on my table, 80% of what I earned came from just 20% of my clients. So let's put this into jiu-jitsu terms. 80% of the things I do that are successful come from 20% of my catalog of moves that I know, of techniques, concepts, philosophies, all that kind of stuff. So what does that mean, right? That means that I need to observe these rules, and these rules are relatively universal. I need to concentrate of my top 20% of my BJJ concepts and techniques. So that means I need to be spending 80% of my time dedicated to that. So those concepts that you see that are not in your top 20%, don't waste your time. Now, what is your top 20%? It's not what you want it to be. Your top 20% is what actually works. I may say, I hate playing mount, but every time I mount somebody, I finish them, right? I hate it, but I finish people. Why? Because that's the most effective concept for me. That means it's one of my top 20%. On the other hand, I like playing guard. I love playing guard, but I'm no good at it. I rarely submit people from guard. right? I rarely get out of guard with a successful outcome. But when I mount somebody, there's a successful outcome. So what that means is that as much as I may like playing guard, I'm most productive in mount. I hope that makes sense to you. So when you're thinking about your training, ask yourself, what am I the most successful at? I need to look at possibly concentrating more time on it. There is a caveat though, and there always is. If you're successful at an advanced technique, but you're not so successful at a fundamental technique, then you might have a problem. The problem is that, and I'll go over this in another video about the difference between an advanced technique and a fundamental technique. But if you're really good at something that is not so high percentage, you need to change your focus, and you need to focus more on the techniques that are more basic and more fundamental. For you intellectuals out there who like to kind of catalog things and spreadsheet things and go through your notes and all that, think about the Pareto principle, think about the 80-20 rule, go back and look at your catalog of knowledge, and I want you to evaluate what you're really good at and consider whether you need to spend more time doing it or whether you need to evaluate the technique itself and maybe throttle back on it. So I'll give you an example. Now this is kind of a real world situation. A lot of people like to play guard these days, but guard is not as high percentage of position as is mount. What a lot of people do is they spend 80% of the time playing guard, but that 80% of their time only accounts for 20% of their success. On the other hand, they spend only 20% of the time on mount because they don't like it so much, but they don't spend that much time on it, but they'll do it. But when they do it, they're 80% successful, right? So let's say I play guard, and every time I play guard, I win 20% of the time. But every time I play mount, I win 80% of the time. I know it might sound a little confusing. You may need to go back and listen to this again. But try and think about your jiu-jitsu in an analytical sense. And what that'll do is it'll increase your ability to monitor yourself. And if you know how to monitor yourself, you can measure your success. And once you measure your success, then you can determine how you need to approach your learning. Because most of us learn in group classes. And in group classes, it's simply you're one of many people in there, and your instructor doesn't necessarily have the time or the opportunity to work on your specific game. On the other hand, if you do privates a lot, then you can do that. You can go back and study your game, and you can tell your professor, hey, look, I need to work on this particular concept, right? Or he may do it. He may tell you what you need to work on as well. But in that way, you can, I think, take your game to another level, but you need to be able to measure it. Right now, jiu-jitsu is so random. Right? You learn randomly. Today you learn this, tomorrow you learn that. There's no rhyme or reason, there's no strategy for your learning. You just learn it because that's what somebody's going to teach you today. And at the same time, you don't spend a lot of time learning, you spend a little time learning and a lot of time rolling. Rolling, as I said many times, you're not necessarily learning. It's not quite conducive to learning while you're rolling. Rolling is really more for practicing execution, but being that your opponent is also going after you, you're not always able to do what you want over and over and over again, right? You're going to do it when he allows you to do it, versus you saying, okay, can you just let me work on passing your guard, over. And after you pass a guard, then stop. After you pass a guard, then stop. You do it again and again and again. On the other hand, if you're just going to tell yourself, I'm going to work with John and I'm just going to try to pass his guard because he's got a good guard. Well, what if John that day is not playing guard? He's always playing from his knees, or he's standing up on you, or he's trying to take you down, but you never ever get a chance to play guard. That's rolling. That's how rolling works. So are you going to get better? Well, you didn't get better that day. So that's a wasted day of training. That's all I got for you. I want to thank you guys for subscribing to our channel. Our subscriptions have been really picking up in the last 30 days, and I really appreciate that from you guys. Also, the likes, the thumbs up, those also help. And also, don't forget to make sure to ring that bell. If you want to help our channel out, we really appreciate any help we can get for this channel, because YouTube is not some place that really pays for the time and effort that Rusty and I put into this. So if you don't mind, or if you need something that we happen to have in our notes below, we've got links for gis, we've got links for books off of Amazon, we've got links for RICKSON's self-defense unit, we've got links for Dave Kama's Patreon channel. We've got links for KAATARO belts. And also, if any of you want any kind of private counseling, or you want some one-on-one time with me over the phone or over a Skype line, we can hook that up through Clarity. So there should be a link for Clarity as well. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Take care now. Happy training. Bye-bye now. Ah!